Metanomics is brought to you by Remedy Communications and Doosan Writers Metaverse.
Okay, so let's turn to another issue, which is, I mean, what implications do you think this week's events have for Twitter itself? I mean, is this going to help them develop a revenue model?
Well, I, for one, don't see a revenue model in overthrowing governments, unless you actually like run a mercenary army, which I don't think Twitter is thinking of diversifying into. But it's going to, as they look for sources of outside revenue and just additional sources of funding, it's going to certainly enhance their case that they are a serious medium and not just a frivolous plaything to be tossed aside. Of course, the flip side of that is they still could be just a step or even just a fad. Somebody else could take the lessons and apply it, and they could become the Friendster of microblogging.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. For anyone who is actually non-ironically saying new, they were kind of social networks that got replaced by MySpace, and MySpace is now looking to maybe be taken over by Facebook. So it's possible that somebody else could be doing the same thing as Twitter a year from now and stealing a lot of Twitter's business. Yeah,
I mean, I think I know Friendster the same way I know Betamax videotapes, that I've never actually, dealt with it, held it in my hand. I know it is an object lesson that just because you have a good technology doesn't mean you're going to win, and someone else can do effectively the same thing. With our few remaining minutes, I'd like to change subjects a little and get your updated thoughts on one aspect of Linden Labs' business strategy. Over a year ago, you were on Metanomics with Gartner analyst Steve Prentice, and we had a very interesting discussion of Second Life's target demographics. So let's take a listen to what you and Steve Prentice had to say. Wiz, can you roll the tape?
If you want a virtual world to be successful, I think you've got to know who you're targeting at, who the focus is. And the question, and I almost hesitate to put it out in this sort of forum, is who is the focus for Linden? Who is the audience, the community, if you like, that Second Life is focused at and targeted to? There's users and residents today, but as Mitch has said, that's kind of flattened off a little bit. What's the next stage of development there?
Mitch, do you want to take a stab at on behalf of Linden Lab answering that question Steve just asked? Or who is the target demographic for Second Life?
People who live on planet Earth. And this is only until extraterrestrial life is discovered. Then it's going to be everybody in the universe. Linden Lab has a very messianic vision of the future of virtual worlds and Second Life's role in that. I don't think they've really. I don't like speaking for Linden Lab, but I'm pretty sure they haven't got any kind of vision of constraint at this point.
So, Mitch, over a year later, do you think Linden Lab is recognizing its constraints and restricting its target market to a subset of the people who live on planet Earth?
Well, that is a very interesting question, and I don't have a yes or no answer for you. I think, first of all, there is something to be said for what has been termed big, hairy, audacious goals. Yes, it sounds ridiculous sitting here today to think that everyone in the world will be using Second Life or a virtual world, but a lot of the most successful tech companies out there had goals that were equally ridiculous at the time of their founding. Microsoft is started up by a college dropout and a few other techie hippies from Seattle not Berkeley, and their goal was to put a computer on every desktop, and that certainly seemed crazy in the late 70s, but by gosh, they did it. And you could say similar things for Google, and similar things for other companies that started up with these big, hairy, audacious goals. I also think that when you're judging a company's goals, you have to look at the company's success. At the time I ridiculed them last year, Second Life wasn't really doing that well. The technology was unstable. The growth was flat. Now Second Life is growing again, and despite the problems we've had in the past hour, the technology is much more stable. We've got a new CEO who I think brings some business basics to the company. So I think the company is doing well. So that goal seems to be doing pretty well. That said, I think there are a lot of obstacles to making it a universal service. One of them is it still requires, mid-range or high-end personal computers, and a lot of the action is going on in cell phones and netbooks and other computers with a lot less computing power than can run Second Life. So it'll be interesting. I'd love to find out whether Linden Lab sees that as a threat, and if so, how they plan to address it. But as far as I can see, they're still as ambitious as they ever were. If you look at some of the comments that Philip Rosedale's been making in public appearances over the past couple of weeks, he's still talking about virtual worlds taking over the real world.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. Now, I know people who want to hear more about what you have to say on social media and virtual worlds can see you on your own virtual world interview show, Copper Robot. So can you tell us what's coming up?
Yeah, we have. Well, I just want to quarrel with you on one point there. We actually don't do a lot of talk about social media and virtual worlds there.
Ah, okay.
I do a lot. To the extent that I do talk about social media, I do it on Information Week. And virtual worlds is a subject that I don't talk about so much as do. That said, the Copper Robot interview program in Second Life, it's alternate Sundays at 6 p.m., also available on web video and as an audio downloadable podcast, which you can subscribe to in iTunes. Past guests have included people ranging from the Lindens themselves to P.W. Singer, who wrote a really excellent book about robots on the battlefield called Wired for War. We've had actress Felicia Day and a cast of the web sitcom The Guild. Coming up this Sunday, we're having a writer named Robert Charles Wilson, who is author of a number of excellent science fiction novels. And I'm reading his latest now, which we're going to talk about on Sunday. It's called Julian Comstock, A Story of 22nd Century America. So I'm hoping you all can join us for that.
Okay, sounds very interesting.